Well, good afternoon, YouTube. My name is jamespfp. This is the Banjocast, and I've returned for yet another streaming period where I'm going to be working on some video. And I figured if I'm going to really be working on the video, I might as well do what I'm doing in front of other people before I put the video up on YouTube. This is a smaller project than I've been working on previously. It involves a large number of video clips which need to be put together. I'm going to use Blender to do it and then proceed from there. But before I get too much further, I have been watching YouTube this afternoon, among other things, and while I was watching YouTube, I noticed a particular video which had been uploaded, and I've just finished listening to it. And I made some comments on the video, which is my want when I do my thing. So I'll probably show which video it was that I have been watching. I'm going to do that first, and then I'll get to the video work that I intend to do on in Blender, I should say, in Blender, not so much on, but here on the Banjocast. Media links posted and updated to the description of this video. When it gets uploaded later, you can find out below in the link or below in the video description. Let's go back to the live control room. I'm taking my chances here. I'm probably going to have a bit of trouble when the time comes to work with Blender, so I'm going to get the website of this done first. The video is one from Sargon of Akkad. He's talking about the ongoing media fury, which is obviously going to happen in and around Canadian universities, certain provinces. There are lots of interesting comments on this video already. I'm nominally a Canadian, so therefore I'm interested. I spent some time in Ontario and I watched the agenda while I was there because I had easy access to it. And I actually do find it useful, as Sargon seems to. And sometimes there's some really interesting things, and the host is at least asking some pretty, or at least asking some decent enough questions, so it's, although sometimes you can see where they're coming from, I guess. Yeah, this is me hovering. I'm going to not capture the mouse today. I'm going to just skip right to the places where I made a comment. So the first one, which gave me pause or gave me something to think about, was back here early in the video, around 9:05. I'll go back a tiny bit before that.
You ever had anybody walk out?
No. I mean, one of the reasons that we give students a caution about the content that we'll be facing is so they can prepare themselves, so they're better able to participate, right?
So they can steel themselves for the horribleness of what it is that they're going to encounter? Okay.
Suddenly shock somebody with, for instance, to use Professor Stein's example of violent sexual imagery in the content, then they don't have a chance to kind of steady themselves and be ready to process it, right? And so giving them the warning makes it easier for them to stay and participate, and makes it easier in particular for people at the intersection of various kinds of historic oppressions to
intersection.
And all of that is part of my academic freedom, right?
This is what I said. Intersection. Just we'll keep that in mind. If I suddenly shock somebody with ... violent sexual imagery, yeah, not everyone disapproves of the shocker, though, do they? Excuse me. Complaining about the equivalent of a jump scare from the point of view of a child or adolescent, while simultaneously asserting that exposure to violent imagery is also violent upon the audience? Yeah, that's nonsense anyway. And someone else with initials JBP will confirm what I say. I recognized that as soon as I heard it. And I have reason for recognizing it. Yeah, I have reason for recognizing it. So all needs to be said. I've made observations of the same nature. I can understand what it's been, but it's to say that you should prepare everybody as in the same manner you prepare a toddler, an infant, for a shock or jump scare is ridiculous. To say that they would not then be able to understand what it was that initially shocked them. or that their exposure to it, the reaction that they felt, even if it's a violent reaction to get sick or whatever else, then that's not necessarily not them that's not them unable to process what just happened to them as adults. Holy Christ. Oh, that's insulting. It's at the intersection. Okay. We'll get back to you. 11:30 or thereabouts.
Your opinion would be better than you holding your position.
Oh.
So you, my friend, are either a coward or a charlatan. And we're about to find out which one it is.
So how do we improve that diversity? And part of that is, how do you get people to speak up in class and actually have a voice and have a discussion? And then as a professor, how do I promote that at a genetics class, which is not necessarily, traditionally an area for discussion? I think it's one of the things that we're learning how to do over the last 10 years, 20 years. How do you start those conversations? How do you engage people? And then as an individual, how
traditionally, and we're learning, right? The genetics professor is forced to admit that this type of discussion is traditionally not up for discussion. He says traditionally, right? There might be good reasons for this tradition of sticking to discussion about what can be observed, replicated, theorized, and proven. And then I made an edit shortly after. Other than systematic patriarchy, or why free expression is too oppressive, or toxic individuality, and or identity. Oh, that identitarian group. Oh. See, the value that's actually being challenged is an individuality and identity, which is older than a certain cutoff point. Why is that so important? Then I responded, AKA RPM, revolutions per muse, and then I had added other words to that later. All the way up. Oh yeah, this is the next one coming. I didn't get the number for the next one, so I'm going to skip right ahead to. Comment. I'm not going to comment on my comment that just says all the way up. It's beside. You'd have to listen to the whole thing if you're interested in that comment. You can figure out where it goes. You figure out that yourself. I said everything I'm going to say in that comment.
Administrator.
At around a minute 23 and onwards.
Is not to get into those debates. What really matters is that all the programs you talked about, which are very important and from my perspective, a core part of the university, thrive, and faculty members and students feel free.
She'll be given
come
such
into the classroom.
She's going to be called such ugly things in the next little while. I'm glad that she made this interview entertaining to listen to. Sargon of Akkad said exactly the same thing. He found her the most persuasive and also the most easy to understand and agree with.
Have these debates. The role of university administrators, fundamentally beyond everything else, and many of them are scholars in their own right, but their role in their current jobs is to protect those rights.
Right.
Which is why any of this is happening, because currently, at least with Ram Buchanan and Lindsay Shepherd, their job is to infringe those rights. How dare you express things on a university campus that go counter to social justice? It's problematic.
But what I'm saying to you, Janice, is that often their silence is an abrogation of those rights. By their very silence, what they're saying is that some voices matter more than others within the context.
By whose silence?
Of the institution.
I don't think that's true.
Well, we fundamentally disagree on that.
Let's look at what the University of Toronto, one concrete example, did when Jordan Peterson.
Oh, the administration.
They did what the university did. They organized the debate.
They organized a debate that was fundamentally flawed. And Jordan Peterson, it was not even the question of Jordan Peterson's work, because he doesn't work in the areas that he's claiming to criticize.
That's not true. Ironically, I think it might be exactly the wrong way round. Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist.
Wow.
He is an expert in...
Not a psychiatrist.
...identity. In fact, here's a voice clip of him explaining precisely what you don't seem to understand.
So I was watching Louis C.K. the other night, and he's a great philosopher. And he said that if you I'm sorry.
When this started, the first time I watched this, I honestly sat back, relaxed, and said, well, I think everything is going to be okay with this video. So I think, Sargon, you've done an exceptional job of picking this particular clip for dead center in the middle of the content. I think it makes sense.
I don't normally use profanity, but Louis C.K. does, and I am quoting.
Who? Louis C.K.? Oh, wow. What are we going to do? Do we listen to Louis C.K. or not?
Well, if you call someone an asshole, they can't actually object because it's not up to them. It's up
I think Louis C.K. is an asshole himself, though. Hey.
to someone else to determine if that's the case, because that identity classification is actually a socially negotiated process, and that's the thing about your identity. The idea that your identity is a subjective construct. It's like, and I'm being literally truthful about that. That's what 2-year-olds think, and that's why they can't play with others. So 2-year-olds are egocentric, and they cannot expand their conception of the world to include the minds of others. They don't really learn to do that till between 2 and 4, and by the way, if they don't learn that by 4, they never learn it. And so
I could cut this off at this moment in time, insofar as I recognize exactly what I was hearing and why I'd already observed it elsewhere in my life over a long period of time. I'm the eldest of several siblings. I've come from a family that had several siblings at my parents' generations, and all of everyone in my own generations has had several offspring type of thing. One way or the other, I've been surrounded by a lot of identity negotiation up to a certain age, but after a certain age, I also get what Peterson's saying.
by the time they're 4, what they learn is that your identity is actually a negotiation. It's a negotiation from moment to moment and also throughout the course of your life. So for example, even a child who's pretending knows that. You be the mom, I'll be the dad. We'll play house. You can take on that identity and I'll take on this one. But we both have to agree on what the identity is or we can't play.
The problem you're having is that Jordan Peterson can deconstruct your nonsense. Because that's what it is. It is a thinly veiled attack. A culture war you have been launching against universities and frankly against white people in general. And it is the unbelievably altruistic nature of white people that accepts this. Do you think you could go anywhere else on earth and go, well, you know what? The majority of people here have privilege, therefore we need to be given things for free.
He has no expertise in them.
Whoa, really? Really?
I, as a black faculty at the University of Toronto, had engaged in the kinds of things that Jordan Peterson...
I could actually, not to silence this individual, if you're interested in listening to more about what this guy's got to say from this point onward, you go right ahead and listen to the entire video. The link is in the description. I'll also post the link in the chat. Copy. Where is chat? Anybody in the chat this evening? I haven't been looking. Here's the link to the video in question in the live chat room, so if you want to watch there, you certainly can. There was one other comment which I left here, and it's in direct response to a question Sargon of Akkad asked. And I saw that there were a lot of fairly sharp comments left on the video later. If you read the comments first, it might spoil your appreciation for the video, so please pay attention to Sargon of Akkad's video in his own right before you jump to any conclusions, hasty or otherwise, about any comment that you might read. He loved a whole bunch of them, including ones that don't look that they really should be loved, or maybe it's really a well applied Poe. So anyway, what was the link? Where was the? Oh yeah, 3545 truth. 3545. We're getting toward the end there. I was listening to this just before I started the stream, so I was trying to be fairly precise about the numbers and whatnot and what I was going to clip in this show.
A team that wants to limit speech. I love the way you bring up, what is it, slavery and apartheid? What has that got to do with social justice oppressing people in universities?
Now Sargon of Akkad seems to have missed something in his own set of evidence. He's already had a person identify how these two are analogous At what point they're equal. I hear you bring up slavery and apartheid. What has that got to do with social justice in universities? Shit! Merd! I'm forced to offer you an answer because I respect him. I want to offer him a honest criticism on the panelist admission, Sargon. It's his admission as he's listening to someone else. He blurts this out. The apartheid term fell out of favor. Now we call it intersectional to better control market forces. That's the basic reason why white male privilege is restricted at the point of the free market, since they insist on everyone having the same imaginary bubble of privilege that is their supposed suppressors have, or oppressors have, the ones who are putting them down. An intellectually honest criticism, which is what Sargon's going to say later, therefore wouldn't forget to admit that. So when he spits it out, when he, the particular professor who says apartheid, when he spits that out as a pejorative, he's projecting. He's projecting and failing to admit that he's part of, that's a trick in his old toolbox that he's been using. So if he thinks that that's despicable and should be below their high ideals, that you could say the same thing. You're fighting the fire with fire of your own and you're letting the woman explain it? That's enough of that, hey? Thanks a lot, Sargon of Akkad. Enjoyed it. What I don't have queued up is any kind of music for what I'm going to be doing this afternoon. What did I have done beforehand? Oh, I remember. I've got the chat put over on one side here. I'm going to move it over to this side and up a bit. That should work, I think. Yes. So as I said, I've got a load of things to do in Blender. I'm going to also turn this off before I do this next thing. This could cause a crash. Be warned, this could cause a crash. Looks good. I've got to maintain the smallest memory footprint possible while I'm working with various pieces of software this afternoon. Maybe I should do a little bit of an explanation in terms of what it is I do here on a Banjocast. Anyone who hasn't watched previously that it might be watching now for the first time in a long time and hasn't watched from the beginning or while it's even live, I'll be doing some media work from the production point, like post-production really, how to, say, edit together a series of video clips from start to finish into one long segment. And that's going to be done in a piece of software called Blender. Blender itself is fairly well developed. It's come over the years. It's had a lot of ups and downs in terms of who was able to do the development at any given point in time because of financial forces or what have you. I particularly like it though. I have to admit, the more I work with it, the more I tend to want to work with it. It's the best way I could describe it. It has a series of features which are described as mystifying or too difficult or blah blah blah, but it's because it was coded in its earliest times from basically scratch. And then given an update over the years after it became freeware, like open source. So, my clips for this evening's video editing experience all been put up on another partition. But I know where that partition is, so here we go. And in case you didn't see what the name of the folder was there, it's YYZ to YYT. And that would be International Airport Codes. Difficult material to work with, I must admit. So, Funny, what kind of frame rate did it make for this? No, I don't think that should be right. I think the frame should be somewhere around 29.97. Or maybe even a little less. If I put it at 30 frames a second, yeah. So there are some dropped frames in the course of this. The beautiful thing about it is I actually need no audio. This project is only going to be on video. But now that I've loaded this first clip from a drop-down menu over here, that's on this side, that's a file browser. Got a viewer in the middle to actually see what's happening. Viewer has a series of options which include video strips, which like we're looking at below, a video panel, which lets you see the actual image, or combination of the two, which is next to it. I also have an option of turning on color and alpha channels. So if I want to see transparent alpha channels through here, and I've got a good enough graphics card to allow for it, I'm saying if I or you or anyone else has a good enough graphics card to allow for it, because I don't, then that's where you would enable that. I don't at the moment. I'm hoping to rectify that in the near future. I could see some improvements to my workflow via technological advancement, one way or the other. So I'm trying to find what might be a better frame rate for that. Yeah, that's way too slow. It must be closer to there. These clips were all filmed on a camera, obviously. It was filmed on a Kodak camera, an old Kodak camera. I don't know if I've got it packed away because I took it with me as I went out today for a little while. The old camera has a fairly limited frame. It takes 640 by 480. Its bitrate and everything else is knowable. I have a, let me see, I can go to where the files are stored and have a look at the files directly. I'm going to have a peek at what the media itself has encoded on it and see whether or not one file to the next one coincides in terms of the bit rates and what have you. So variable bit rate overall about 11 megabytes per second and no more. Bitrate 10 megabytes per second for the video, 10.9. It's 29.449, this particular one. If I check the very next clip, let me see if this is the same thing. 29.459, so I'm going to have to rectify against the audio, even though I don't plan to use the audio. I'm going to pick a frame rate in actual straight language ease. I have to pick a frame rate to display this final project in, whatever it's going to be. 29.97 is a broadcast standard. That's useful if you want to put it on a television because there'll be no evidence of flickering or dropped frames. However, computers are quite happy to use 30 frames a second, 15 frames a second in some cases. You're watching a stream right now in 15 frames a second. I don't intend to stream it any faster than that until I have better equipment to do so. And that's the nature of my particular beast, I suppose. A good way of looking at it. Let me see if I can't get everything back on the screen here. Right here, right? Show. I'm going to make this window a little bit bigger. This first clip, I can get to the end of this particular clip on a timeline down here by clicking with my left mouse button, dragging. You have a look at what it is that I was taking a picture of. The wingtip of the plane that I'm in and the wingtip of the plane I'm looking at, the Star Alliance one, I can actually see a difference immediately. I'm interested in the weirdest kinds of things, but I figured I could get some of these with a camera because I'm on private property at a public space, which itself is managed by a private concern, but it's a private public concern. You're curious. So I took some of these pictures while I was making a trip from Toronto Airport to St. John's Airport, and it's not the entire trip by any means. It's only enough of the specific moments where I thought you could see something that was interesting, or we could all see something which is interesting that you might not have known to look for before. That's all. That's what I'm up to, in terms of the project itself. But I want these frames of video to actually accord with a common frame rate throughout the entire project. It might as well be 30 frames a second as 29.97. But if it's ever going to be broadcast on television, you might think of putting it in 29.97. That's something to bear in mind. That's also assumed to be the standard even for computer displays sometimes, depending on the software you're using, which kind of tells you who's doing the coding. Anyhow, I like having the choice. I snap that to the end of the audio here by holding Control when I'm left clicking and dragging. It picks frame 552, that's the next frame without audio. So I want to go to the last frame with audio and snap this video to that frame. Or it could actually go forward one and snap this one to that frame as well. And then when it goes back, I get a frame which is being held for a number of frames, but not many. So there's like a few frames one way or the other where the video and audio are out of sync with one another. And it's probably due to the fact that when the camera was started recording, there may have been a short gap at the very beginning. Now the audio from this camera sucks. That's why I wasn't planning on much using the audio here. But I can see from looking at the waveform, such as it is, that it's not particularly high bit rate nor quality, therefore it's not much of a loss. The next most interesting thing to look for is whether or not the audio's form is broken over the period of time that it's recorded. And Media Info told me that the overall length of this particular piece of video is something like 18 seconds. And when I change the frame rate on the project, the audio is the first thing to switch to account for it. I now see that there is one thing evident in this, which is the audio cuts off probably a frame. Yeah. So there's audio actually stops on that frame. I'm going to trim it back to that frame. And all I'm doing there is right clicking on the end of this clip and then snapping it to the green line by hitting Control S or Shift S, and it moves back one. But I did want that one moved forward one, so I'll put it forward one. That way, like, the audio cuts in the right moment. Or I could, like I say, I could just go back one with there and see it. So audio stops, that stops. Now I don't really think that I lost 1/10 of a second in video there, which means I was probably dropping a fairly regular number of frames over the course of the entire length of that 18 seconds. So it's worth my time to try making a speed adjustment. A speed controller will be added. And to do that, I'll first select with a right click this blue section, which is the video sequence. I'm going to move them down this way. And I'm going to hide this for now. Clicking H to hide. I'm going to take this video clip, right click it so it's highlighted in white, and then Shift A, Effect Strip, Speed Control. Puts the speed controller on the strip immediately above. Very little difference in the amount of time it takes for the clip to play. But now all of the frames will be made to concord to the amount of available video or audio data, which is there in the below. Like the length of this time is now the length of that time precisely, given an average, and it makes calculated efforts, does Blender, to figure out where to add in those extra frames every now and again, so that the little gap in the blue strip here with the outline with the gray, that gap of 3 frames will be made up in that length of time to make the two ends coincide. That's all it does. Very useful. Very useful and needs to be understood because this problem exists. So what you do to rectify a camera which isn't particularly good at keeping its frames, depending on light situation or what have you, how cold the batteries are perhaps, it could be anything. I'm now going to save this file before I go any further. I'm going to save as, and I have a single folder where I put all my blends, things that I've done. Save, go here and I'll give it a new name. This is going to be YYZYYT. Hit enter twice. Now that's saved, shows on the top of the frame. But you can't actually see it at the moment. Now that I've got Blender doing this, let's just have a quick look at the way this plays out. I see I'm getting a pretty good frame rate. Like it's maintaining 30 frames a second, which is good. It bumps every now and again. Get an idea of how long it took me to take that actual piece of video, which wasn't very long. It's only 18 seconds, so it looks correct. Motion looks good. All right. That's the first segment. Here comes the next one. I go to the end there, holding control, and it snaps. The next 2 segments are, the next 2 pieces of the video are added. One is an audio track. I'll put the waveform on. We'll look and see how much longer this one is. Quite a bit. Let's go to the end of the audio and see where the actual end is. Back a frame. A frame, it actually cut off midway through a frame. Well, that's kind of neat. I've got to bring video all the way up to there then. I can let it cut at that point and it will work. Let's see how many frames that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 17 in total. 17 drop frames in this one. Much, I guess, slower frame rate. Shift A, speed controller. And now see that there's no gap between these 2 videos. It's just hard cuts between the moments that I took. And this clip is quite a bit longer, and therefore that's the reason why there's more frames on the end. And since there's 17 there, I can assume it's about 5 times longer than the previous clip. And it isn't about 5 times, but it's easily twice as long. At least at this frame rate, but frame rate is not the real issue here. Now, how terrible is this audio? I might as well give you a taste of how terrible this audio from this camera is. First indication of how terrible the audio is look how loud it is. It's quite a, fills up the display because it's told to be as loud as, so to make things as clear as possible. But from the inside of an airplane, it's pretty damn pitiful. And normally I would turn it down as much as that, which is 23%. I would put it at 23% normally if I was out in public, not in a tight enclosed cabin space where there's constantly air hissing into the damn thing. No. So I'm going to put that down to, say, 15% for now. Because I know. I hit page down to go to the beginning of the clip, which I have selected. I'm going to hit play. Alt A. Not terrible, but I mean, not much better than a bad telephone. One little hole. So that's that clip. I'll now hide the audio. It doesn't really matter as much as what the video does. And now I get an idea of what it is which is happening in the background. Maybe I will use the audio. Maybe I will use the audio. If that's the worst that it can get. But we'll see later. It gets worse than that when we're in the air. I'm sitting right on the wing. Engines are right below the wing. Pretty close to the engine. I'm wondering when I remember. Yeah, one of these clips which is coming up here. I'm gonna physically identify the plane, the airplane, the airframe which I'm sitting in, because it was the same plane which I flew up there on, not the same exact airplane. It was the same type. So I was curious about what that type was. I didn't recognize. I thought I recognized it from the inside first. This thing, and I have been on one before. I guess this thing replaced the. How to say this? This thing replaced the old BAE 142, I think, which was a high wing with 4 engines slung underneath it, shortish range regional hopper. This one's got a longer range. It's more like a 737 or an Airbus, but the smaller ones. So I say 737. I said 737, right? No Boeing aircraft were harmed in the making of this video. Sorry. Just wanted to throw that in there. Couldn't help myself. This looks like another one of those, yeah. It cuts off right there. So I'll bring the video all the way up to that point, and then go back to see that indeed it cuts off. There'll be maybe a short burst of audio at the second there, the frame that it cuts off, but it won't be a short gap in the audio, but it won't be very long. Shift A to get the things that I want to add here. To this strip, I'm going to add a speed controller, which I've been doing all along. This one here would be 0.15 as well. I think this is when we start rolling. Maybe not. I had a moment or two to check whether or not I wanted to use zoom, but I know the camera doesn't give very good results when zoomed, so it's going to be kept back most of the time. There's a TV station right in front of me. I mean, what do I say? There's a screen display in the seat back right in front of me. There are also speakers strategically located around the aircraft. It's not a single, well, there is a single PA system, but the local seats, the seat level is where you have installed the things to listen to. And if you want privacy, you plug in on your seat. There's been so many plug-ins on my seat. So many people have plugged in there that the jack doesn't want to stay in it. Funny, right? It kept popping out as I was listening. I had to plug it and then make sure that everything that I could ball up and put next to it were like that. Stuck in the seat so that it wouldn't pull out. Imagine. And yeah, that's aircraft in a big line there, all WestJet. WestJet's schedule. I guess they must pay for priority to get onto the runway, or they just get block time. I don't know how the hell that works. I've never asked. Here comes the next clip. Simply drag it down, hit G, hit Y. It snaps it to the Y axis of motion. I'm going to turn the waveform on. I'm going to turn the volume down. Let's go to the end of the clip. Again, we have a period of time when there may or may not be audio. I could cut that short piece of audio off since the video is going to end anyway. I'll accept that the audio is, oops, Shift S to snap it. I accept that the audio is going to have a short gap in it. For the, provisionally speaking, I'm accepting that gap. I could get rid of the gap. We could get into that later. But for the meantime, I want to make sure I get all of my clips accounted for and reviewed, just to have an idea what they're looking like. Hey, Hilljack has joined the crowd. Hilljack, I'm working on a short video sequence that I took when I made a trip from Toronto to St. John's in the last 2 days. So I took a series of shorter clips rather than trying to film the whole thing and having a huge file at the end. I'll do the putting together of short clips in today's episode in order to get back into the swing of what it is I want to do with other issues like media criticism from Charlottesville and official narratives and the like. How are you doing, Hilljack? Good to see you. I'll put the chat interface over to one side there. Am I loud enough? So yeah, the aircraft is being pulled back now, but it hasn't spun up its engines yet. The main generators hasn't probably started to charge. They got like an APU unit for that. Funny, I can take on this camera and take all these clips on an airplane, but they won't allow me to take a small little container of horseradish. I thought this shot was beautiful. We got the plane that I'm moving in, the plane of the line of empty carts, and then the plane of the plane on the runway several meters away. The plane of the plane. Oh, hear the rumble? Hear the spin up? Engage the APU. Start the engine. And yeah, I'm merely an aficionado of aircraft things. I don't actually know how to fly an aircraft. I possibly could if I had to, I suspect, but however, we'll leave the possibly coulds and the anything else's to themselves. Hey, Hilljack, I also had an idea, Hilljack, I got a question for you. Did you see Billy Bush on Colbert, yes or no? That's the basic question. Did you or did you not see Billy Bush on the Colbert Show? And if so, I would entertain some thoughts as to what anyone might want to do about it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, wow. 32 frames skipped by the end of this one. So this one must be fairly long, or I have no idea. Speed control. My camera gives such inconsistent results that I ceased to use it some time ago because of those inconsistent results, and the fact that I had to do something like this every time in order to make everything marry up in Blender. But once was done, was well worth it. Oh, I'm taking a picture here from a distance and using zoom to see whether or not this is going to be really visible. I might want to do some post-processing on the image here. This is an Air Egypt plane, I think. The other one is an Air Somalia plane. Yeah, and the one in the middle there, quite obviously Air Canada. But there's different classes of Air Canada. Star Alliance, the one that I'm in, I think is called Rouge, which tends to tell me that it's got a Quebec investor base, I think. I would be guessing there. It's called Rouge, huh? Wang? An interesting trip for that reason, because I recognized at the very beginning that the part of the issue here is the equipment that I'm flying on and the group that I'm flying with, who's going to get priority at certain places. I don't know if we're going to see it in this video, or maybe I've already seen it and just didn't and ignored it because when I first encountered it, I hadn't been thinking about it too much. I'm curious now. I'm going to go back and look in the video to see if I can see any of what I'm thinking about. Yeah, I probably see a little bit here. Right on. So this advertising right here is all over YYZ. Every gate, every single like jetway that you would walk up to get into the terminal. Every one of them got that on it, and several have been graffitied. Quite a few, in fact. I guess over the years they get graffitied from time to time. I guess someone wakes up and realizes who it is that's doing all the advertising. What are they? Do they build jetways? What are they? Oh, it turns out they're a bank. Turns out they're a bank. Yeah, that's true. Oh, that one is visible. Oh, I was trying to make it unhide. I've got a better mouse for doing this thing. That's not working? Yes, it is. Okay. If I hold control and scroll here, will that work? No. Need to zoom in on the end here. I'm using my scroll wheel on the mouse to do that. I can also use the scroll wheel while holding control to do that, to scroll it, scrub it side to side. If I hold Alt, it will scrub the green line side to side. So I can measure by click. Like that's one click with Alt key. I'm now going to get the end of this clip by right-clicking on the triangle part, specifically, Shift S to snap it, then Shift A to get the speed controller. Done. Now when I go back a frame, again I've got video, it's been audio corrected already. Oop, I zoomed up quite a bit too much that time. Let's go to here. Short audio gap. This is probably the best chance they're going to have to see to look back at the terminal itself. On the flight up, I had a slightly better seat for access to the window, but it was worse located than where I am now, in the sense that it was behind the engine more. It's louder back there. There's two reasons to want to sit forward on an aircraft. It's not only because you get better service at the front. I don't do any talking to the camera except in short parts while at 37,000 feet. And what I'm here looking at is the length of time it takes to taxi from the gate to the end of the runway. We'll see the name and number of the runway when we get ready to go. On the tape later, I'm going to guess incorrectly, I think, at the runway I landed on. I underestimated how far we were going to be going over the top part of the Avalon before turning on final. So we came in pretty much on our crosswind leg and then turned on final. Just one smooth motion. And it was an unexpected direction. I'm like, what? So that must be the, not captain, but the second officer, like the XO. The audio is actually surprising me for how loud it is, but I had to turn it down to 15%. I bet you can survive at 12. Bet you can survive at 007, 7%. %7 would be 0.07. Thank you. But yeah, I've got it turned down in Blender, or Open Broadcast Studio anyway, so I'll turn it up a bit. Just a tiny bit. Uh-huh. It ain't that loud, is it? Louder in my headphones. I suppose I could fix that, like easy. I'll put it at 50% audio there. Huh. Okay, that's the end of the clip. I'm using Alt-A to get it to autoplay. I can also press this play button. It'll do the same thing. And I want AV sync, which means Blender uses a certain amount of its cycles to make sure everything stays in synchronization to both of these records on disk. Now, as I load each of these different clips, though, I'm loading more and more video into memory. You can see how some of them are very short, some of them are very long, comparatively. And that's part of the issue with the sizes of the adjustment in frames. If I don't make that adjustment, the frame rate will come out wrong when I try to play it. Let's get to the next one. I think the identification of the plane might be in this one. I could be wrong about that. I'll try 17%. I'll go here, I'll go back a frame. Oh look, that one totally loses 2 frames. There's that one, and then it stops right on that frame. So I'm going to correct this one and then make this adjustment so that when I go back a frame and the audio cuts, there'll be no video when the audio is done. I'll save that now. I'm going to Shift A and effect strip speed control. A lot of repetitive tasks in this type of a deal. I'll hide that one and let it play from here. Two, 4, 0, 06. Oh yeah. The runway that I'm on. And look at that. We pull up to a stop. There's the number of the runway in red, 24. No, we're just waiting for turn. Needs a certain amount of separation between planes taking off in order to maintain that distance. That's all air traffic control has to do. Okay, I'm going to turn off the audio now. So I've got an adverse shooting condition to deal with. The sun is right here. I've got a reflection of the sun here. You can see artifacting occurring on the frame. I've got this pink line to look at and consider. It might be a little too much light. Luckily, I'm taking off on 2406. Which direction would it likely be? Oh, we'll know as soon as we take off. It's 24. We take off 24 and then we turn around more like, it's not 06 either, but here's this one. Draw the waveform, turn it to the lower volume, get to the end of the clip, check it. You get to this end. Looks like it's still overlapping. Yes. So I need to go over a frame. Need to grab this end. Shift S to snap it. Shift A to apply the speed control. This is all in the video sequence editor of Blender. You can get to video sequence editing via. Well, I've got an edit. I've got one added here to my own called video editing. That may well be in the. This is one that I've modified from what sometimes pops up automatically. So you can sense that there was a cut in the motion or timing there. Part of this is a physical problem coming from the sun itself. The sun is what's causing this interference pattern. And that's exactly what this is. It's an interference, and discrete one, going up and down the entire line of the CCD. So it's like a lightsaber has been introduced simply by having the sun there. It also gives me a straight up or down line, like a plumb line. And look what happens when I block it. So I could also lower the shade, or I could try changing the direction of the lens. Ah, yes. There's ways of getting rid of that. This clip is almost 4 minutes long. Sorry, 3 minutes. 3 minutes and a bit. You can hear why I say I don't think it's much. I don't think the audio is as good as it is on the ground when you're in the air. It gets worse. Haha. I think the bit rate of the video is somewhere around 2,000, 2,300 maybe at the most. On the wing here, there's two identifying marks which are barely visible on the resolution of the camera, but this is a flap setting 1 through 3, and this is flap setting 4 onwards, 4 to fully down. And these wings have flaps at the front and also at the back, the leading edge and the trailing edge. So when the flaps for landing are first being applied, I have an ideal seating arrangement to see just exactly how much flaps are being applied. Lucky me. Lucky me. Kind of want the title there, but I'm going to get picky about that now while I'm watching this little clip. Oh, shoot. Yeah, I'll do that when the next clip's playing. So, here comes the next one. Yeah, I do have a clip showing the make and model of the plane. I've got to find it. I've got to find it again because I certainly remember taking it once I noticed that I didn't look for it the first trip, didn't notice it. Didn't take it for the name of the title of the plane. Again, this clip, look, ends practically right on that frame, so I'm going to go back one and snap it physically to there, and then snap this one to there as well. Shift A for the speed controller. Zoom it all the way back. I need that. Turn to, say, about here for preview purposes. Closer to altitude. Pitchforks, flaming torches could be smaller. Yeah, the seatbelt, but the seatbelt alarm came on again. And the reason was we were going through practically the only turbulence we encountered through the entire flight. That's during some of those moments. I noticed twice on the flight that the turbulence was at a very particular level, and we encountered it twice. You can see a difference in the previous frame and this one. Do you notice it? If you haven't noticed it yet, you will. You will be. I'm trying to get through all of these. I've been saying and announcing what I'm doing at each time anyhow. This project is starting to get lengthy. I mean, I'm getting towards, 12 minutes worth of video overall. I'm easily going to want twice this amount of time. And I think probably 4 times that amount it would be a safe bet, and then I can trim it back later. It's less than 50 minutes of video. Way less. But it would be nice to have the entire thing ready to play while I did something else, kind of thing. I don't necessarily need the audio, but there it is. So have we watched this yet? Let's do that again. Immediately after takeoff. Oh, we're getting here to the borderline between Maine, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI is in the distance this way. Plane has changed direction, in case you haven't noticed, in order for me to... Well, here you go. We clearly... Oh, man, what was I saying earlier? Frig, what direction did I take off in? Yeah, it was clearly 24, runway 24. Had to be, because I'm on the port side wing, looking that way, with the sun on this side as I move that way. Clearly I took off on runway 24. I'm clearly now shooting with the sun behind me, because I'm traveling in the opposite direction. You know what I mean? Awesome. So there's lots of evidence of different things in the video, which I was eager to take a picture of, see what the camera could do. I kind of knew what the camera could do, but I'd never tried it in this particular context. So I took the opportunity, knowing that if I lucked out and caught just the right weather, I might get some nice pictures of specific things from above or off to one side. I did talk to the camera once or twice, so I'm eager to find a good audio level for this audio track. I think that's Sable Island. No, that's south. That's maybe that. I gotta look at my map. That's a sandbank island. It's in the bay there between Nova Scotia and northern Nova Scotia and PEI. If that's not Sable Island, then it is another island similar to that. Mostly sand, probably seals. Might be a research station there or something. I don't know. We're at cruising altitude 37,000 feet. The cloud bank in the back is practically marking where Prince Edward Island is, PEI. everything is fairly repetitive at this point. Just continually dropping a track in, checking the length against the audio track, making a determination, will I or won't I be having a short break in the audio? Will it really matter that much when the audio is almost insufferable to begin with? I have no idea. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've been doing this also in other contexts, which is to use the video strip editor here to get a bigger picture. Ooh. So here we have Prince Edward Island and Cape Breton. I could see Brador Lake. I could see quite a bit when we were passing over it. Did I say sea at the beginning? Let's see. Yeah, Cape Breton. So I don't need this audio as I've been explaining elsewise. Don't need to actually listen to the whole thing every time I go through it now. I'm merely curious as to what state of the audio might be. So at least once I'm forcing myself to listen to it, and if and when I'm ready to do a final cut, I'll figure out what I'm going to do with the audio at that point, more in depth than what I already have, which is merely lower the audio level. Does quite a bit. I mean, it does help a lot to merely lower the audio level. There are other ways to more technically do that. Another one of these unavoidable gaps. Unavoidable. So how many frames here? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Might expect this. No Billy Bush? Well, it was an interesting interview, but I had a funny feeling that I smelled a dirty rat, and I also know now because of Colbert, because of his generosity in playing a certain infamous source again, i.e. the tape, but only a small clip of it. Because of this, he gave me enough physical evidence to work with to perhaps do a little bit of forensic investigation, because I could I could see a use for it, so to speak. So I've got access to the video in question. Maybe we'll get at that later, because I would like to make an audio analysis of Billy Bush from 2005 and now. And that's me taking the picture here of the. I waited till late in the flight to do this, but I was watching a movie on the on-screen entertainment until now. So there's a huge gap between some of these clips. Waiting for the in-screen mat to come on here, or the in-flight interactive mat they call it. Interactive means it changes. You can't control anything. It just changes. Interactive. I'd like to be able to play with it if it's interactive. Go, how far to here? And if we went this way instead? Overall distance of the flight, something like 2,200 kilometers. 2,200. Got any snow? Hey, no, we do not. This is an interesting question, Hilljack. We have lots of frost this fall. I thought maybe we would have snow in December that would stay for a month or two over the winter months. February, in the last 20 years or 30 years of my life, it has been my experience that, not 30, but definitely the last 20, it's been my continuing experience that February is when the thaw begins. But the the thaw period can turn into snow right up until maybe May or June. That snow won't stay either. So we don't have any snow on the ground, but today we had snow squalls which started to dust the hills and trees and stuff. We've had enough low temperatures that the ground could keep snow on top of it in some places. Toronto, they were closer to it. They've got a lot of frost in their ground up there. More than we got. The only interactions you can make are right there. Change the volume on an interactive map, which is negligible. That's the corner of the province that I reside in. You got snow squalls coming tomorrow, or just rain squalls? So I've just pointed to the same thing twice. The corner of the province, southwest corner. The length of distance, like as the crow flies, between that corner and where I'm going is about 600 nautical miles, 1,000 kilometers. Oh yeah. We don't get inches of snow until late December, January, and then it'll be snow squalls that are like heavy tropical rain squalls except colder, so it's blizzards. We don't get but it's marine effect here. We don't get the same like extreme low temperatures, so once snow has fallen and then the temperature drops low enough to keep it in like a deep freeze state, it ain't going anywhere. And the higher you go in altitude, the easier that is to achieve, right? When I was in Toronto, I noticed, it wasn't in Toronto actually, we were driving southwesterly from Toronto. And as we got into the southwest, I noticed a ski hill. As we passed it by, I was like, oh wow, that ski hill's got a little bit of snow on it, but it isn't from natural snowfall. They're already making snow to see whether or not it'll stay. Because if it will stay with the amount of frost that's in the ground, they'll be able to get a really good base of this artificial shit down before the stuff starts snowing on its own. Yeah, Clipper bringing snow from Lake Michigan. I understand. It's a lot like lake effect snow that it got blown higher and then lower, right? Woo. We get ours from the Gulf Stream. If a Gulf Stream tropical storm gets to here when we get a cold snap coming down, it turns to a bad blizzard. The worst year I've ever seen, we had, in the space of a month, we got a major snowstorm of several feet once every 5 days. It was like clockwork. It was as if there was a cloud street of weather coming up, in the sense that there would be weather then nothing, then weather then nothing, but all in very regular bumps. And the amount of snow we got as a result of all of this regular humidity, which got converted to snow, the more and more we got of it, the more it added up. So we had snow shoveled and thrown higher than the height of the house that we were living in. It was incredible. More snow than anyone could deal with. But 1 year only. It was the winter of 2001. Quite a bit of snow. Draws away phone. I started thinking about this today. The whole Canada is getting a lot of attention on various social media platforms because of certain professors and what they had to say about this, that, or the other thing. But if I am to use pronouns, which, for example, if it's not right to assume you know a he or a she, then it's okay to say they, right? But some of these funny pronouns are like xe. You mean like to say they? It's okay to say they? Well, I don't know what they are up about, but if you say they, you're going to get accused of something else. If you haven't figured that out yet, well, there you go. Allow me to help you. So that's the interactive map. We're coming along the length of the province. The province's south coast, and I'm trying to guesstimate more or less where I would find the place where I'm from. I have two ways of doing it. One is to physically look and see whether or not I can see it there. I can look for land, I can look for geographical features which are on the island itself on this edge, or I could try to find the islands in the sea which I'm looking for specifically, but they're small enough and at this distance and altitude there's no way I'm going to spot them. We're several hundred nautical miles away from St. Pierre at this moment in time, but I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, the picture is terrible through the bottom of the window. It's one thing I did notice. It doesn't really do much good to shoot through all of that junk. Yeah, that would be a pretty good guess, somewhere around where my finger is. I took a long while to scrutinize what the coastline was telling me and what little of it I did recognize. Well, it isn't totally terrible. It just needs to be way lower, I think. I mean the audio. Ooh, cancel that. Control Z to undo that last ill move. We go draw waveform. We go 33% for audio. Go to the end. Zoom in. See how long that gap is. It's more than adequate for that. We'll have a short gap in this clip as well. Speed controller. Go to here. Marking locations of large bays, features, and or fjords that I can see from here. There's a limited number of them. I left myself a message there using a C form with my hand in reverse. The Canagra Peninsula is the last one. That's the third one. I can see almost as far as Canagra, I think. Well, I might be wrong about that. And the picture quality is terrible. It's a blob, right? I might have to do some serious editing to make this better. Not editing as much as post-processing of the image itself. But since I'm already adding in a certain number of frames to this process, I have a choice. I've got a whole bunch of clips here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 up till now, right? It's the 15th one. 16th coming. So I could physically, due to the way Blender works, I could physically, I'm using B key to box select. I can physically hide all of those clips as long as the speed controllers stay visible, because the video data is being read from these file associations, and then the video is being reproduced as a new set of frames plus 1 or 2 extra frames, or plus any number of extra frames to make up for the skipping, to make up for the dropped frames. Now I have another choice. Do I want to do my video editing on this part of the image on the file itself, or on what's been additionally added to it? It makes more sense to do it on the top side than the bottom. Although it's less computation if I do it on the bottom one than the top. Less frames, less available frames. Some of them are going to be used more than once, so why would I want to recalculate it 3 times, right? Or however many times it happens to be. So there are all kinds of choices to consider. Let's see what's doing here. bigger image. Oh yeah, I spotted an airplane flying in the opposite direction, close enough that I could easily make out the... I don't know if I would have made out any of the tail numbers or stuff. If I had a set of binoculars, I could have. It had separation not at altitude, but at distance, so it had to have been greater than 5 miles away, but no more than 10. It was pretty big. We're coming up on a cloud bank. Plane going that way.
Separation, I tell you. Just saw a plane off the wing over there. Look. I don't know if you see it.
If I did the, I really do have to do some post-processing work on the video, because I know I saw a plane and I know that the plane flew through the frame. I should also have some kind of evidence of it, even if it's only a few blurry pixels. The light being reflected from the aircraft with the sun behind me, ideal. If there's a chance of me catching it, that's it. You can see the shape of the wing here. This is a winglet which follows the chord of the wing down to the edge. And it doesn't do that above and below the wing. It only curves up on one side of the wing. It's the Embraer 190 is the make and model. I must have another clip there as I got into the seat that shows what the make model is.
Sure, they'll be in that 2 miles this way and 1 mile that way, 1,000 feet. Sure, that's Grammy down there.
Okay. Strangely, the flight takes a wild turn in this case. What do I mean by that? Well, I go from worrying about... Oops, sorry. I gotta get that right. I go from worrying about making physical observations to making observations of weather conditions on the way down. So, this screen which is in front of me will now be doing some of the work by letting me know exactly how far along I am according to its own flight recorder data, which is being fed through the entertainment system here. Ooh, excuse me. Ugh, still catching up with the whole jet lag thing. And an hour and a half is nothing. It's easy to deal with. Going to lose a tiny bit of audio on this one. Not very much. Doesn't matter near as much as it did when we were on the ground. So I should be able to read some of this here from even this terrible image. That was my suspicion. I'll put a speed controller in place. I'll catch the audio. It's already been reshifted for volume purposes. It was telling me Port Basque is 100 and something odd kilometers, whereas St. Pierre was a certain number of kilometers in front of us. We were going to fly almost immediately, like directly over St. Pierre. My rationale for finding Ramia is quite frequently it is about halfway along the length of this coast. The Burin Peninsula marks the inside edge, this marks the other edge. Halfway along that length, you'll find Ramia. White Bear Bay should be somewhere in around here. Then we get over to Conagra by here. And Beta Spear. But this set of reservoirs or set of lakes and stuff would all empty out down over this part. Let's get this to full screen again, or larger mode. A lot of grain in the image. Stephenville, 117 miles. Oh yeah, St. Pierre is there. Oh shoot, I just went back way too far. Let's listen. Stephenville 117. That's regular miles. I don't know if that St. Pierre. Could be nautical miles, but they were using kilometers and miles, so I'm thinking it's probably imperial miles, not nautical miles.
78 miles, St. Pierre.
78. Ramia is only 50 miles from St. Pierre. Over water. Nautical miles, which around 78. No more than 78 miles. In fact, quite a bit less than, probably only 60 something. Because it only gains about 1/10 of its size in conversion. Some numbers are better than others. 166. Grab on the Y now removes the, or allows me to grab and actually reposition the audio is what I want to say. I want to get to the end for the clip. We're on the way down. Now the descent has begun. That one goes back at least one frame. This one snaps. I now add Shift A with speed control. It gives me that much back. The waveform's been had its audio adjusted. On the way down. I want to hear that again.
Seven miles, Clarendon.
67 miles to Clarendon, okay.
Northeast. About 25,000 feet.
As we were going through this weather system, this was bringing a lot of rain our way. There's different levels in the clouds, different areas that were open and closed or turbulent or not. The turbulence was all high. And as we went lower, it got less and less turbulent and more wet. And also at another altitude, the state of the condensation on the outside of the window changed from frozen to water. It's choosing Air Canada, Star Alliance partner, and blah blah blah. Deep do Bob. They all talk the same, don't they? Hi, this one here, draw the waveform. We'll put it at say 27%. This is a long one. 15 minutes later. I'm going to take a guess that the speed controller needs to be no longer than that. It doesn't matter what order I do this in. If I change this length, that will change automatically. It may want to change, it may not. It didn't. No change. You know how to avoid change? Old joke. Never break a dollar. Never break a dollar, friends. Last clip. 4, 3, 2, and... Why can't I hear it? It hasn't started yet. Flaps are going down.
So ceiling about 9,000.
I'm making estimates and calculations on my phone periodically as we land. Converting between meters, say, and feet is easy.
It's flying right over Bay Roberts.
Quite literally setting up for final approach. This is the cross wind leg. I think I was getting better results with the screen half down. I'm not sure with the window screen. Shade. Yeah, at this moment in time, we could be landing 1-1. That's depending on the wind, right?
Meters. Just shy of
temperature was, the temperature differential was easily greater than 15 degrees Celsius. Like ground temperature in St. John's was about 5 degrees above zero at the time. A little colder than that today. Ooh, excuse me. That's what happens when I'm in an airplane too. I'm like, oh, I gotta have a nap, man. I just snooze here until this is done. It's the first flight in a long time that I've stayed awake for the whole thing. Slept almost all the way up there. On the wrong side of the plane, looking at the blue water in the United States. We flew in over the United States the early part of the trip, over northern Maine. I guess there's an air corridor there, like a freeway. Might even be a toll road for all I know. That's flaps. Man, my ears are popping sympathetically. Wow, why is that doing that? No, better. I wish I had some bubble gum. Ooh, I do have something to snack on. I've got snacks, man. You're gonna have to forgive me for one moment while I go grab some snacks. I'll be right back. Snacks are essential, an essential part of the YouTube experience. So I've been told. I don't necessarily endorse everything I hear on YouTube, but that did have a ring of truth about it. Snacks are not going to get me through the night either. I have to sooner or later stop and make some supper, so this is the first part of a two-parter, I think. What am I eating? Yogurt-covered pretzel. Give me a shot. Highly sweetened yogurt, very salty pretzel. All natural. Ingredients: yogurt coating, sugar, palm kernel oil, non-fat dry milk, sweet whey milk, non-fat yogurt powder, cultured whey, non-fat milk, titanium dioxide, color, titanium dioxide. That would explain the price. That's the third constituent other than these other two complex constituents. May contain peanuts or tree nuts. Doesn't have much more in it though, after the titanium. Soy lectin, lactic acid, natural flavors. Pretzels. What I was using to guess the direction we were landing in. I mentioned Clarenville there a couple clips ago. That's where that is. Here. Natural titanium dioxide, exactly. Now, to be in its defense, I don't know that titanium. I think titanium is one of those elements which exists on what they call the natural island of stability, in the sense that they're not toxic to human consumption or human life, and therefore they actually have some. You can eat them and not worry about the bad effects of having eaten them. But I'm not positive about that. Surgical steel, iron. Iron happens to be one of the ones that we can totally deal with. Try nuts.com. Yeah. What? What's that for the snacks? Oh wow, what a price I found on cashews on nuts.com. Oh, it's got a huge hill, Jack. Flaps all the way down, clearing the clouds at Is it really? Dried fruit, nuts, and snacks? Wow. Still some fall colors hanging on here. I'll be going to the supermarket next time I get some of the same kind of things. These do like hurt the belly. Not terribly fond of them. Don't eat too many at once. Titanium dioxide, made from recycled SR71. Oh, right, because, titanium, when it's at high altitude like that, flying very fast, so not only is it subjected to those heats, it also gets slightly radioactive due to the exposure to cosmic rays. Wow! I probably shouldn't have thought about that too much, eh?
Start flaring here.
What a time to stop, what? Outer marker, inner marker. Woo! He hits the brakes too. Oh. Hey Greg, welcome back. Yes, I am.
142. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's true. It is currently the most common pigment. It used to, frequently in the past, we used lead dioxide or lead oxide. Sorry, lead oxide used to do it. This is why I say titanium might or might not exist on the island of stability in the periodic table of elements. It might be in a region of elements, a group of elements, which isn't toxic to human consumption and generally doesn't rust or oxidize too easily. Oh, we're just landing. Greg, I've been doing some video editing to show how to take a series of shorter clips and marry them all together into one long one. I had a bunch of short clips to do this with, so I'm using it to demonstrate. I need to get back into the whole mindset before I jump back into the pool I'd started in September.
130 knots.
But that's why I figured the estimation for the touchdown speed was around 130 knots. Might have been as low as 110, 120. He had four flaps or greater than almost. He came in hot, and then he uses brakes and slowed her down. Signal Hill is right off there. That's the airport terminal for St. John's. When it's oxidized, yes, its chances are less toxic, but that's not true for lead oxide, is it? Lead oxide is toxic. It's not merely because it's lead. It's because it's kind of more reactive sometimes in the right situation. If your body was to take in lead oxide, it must be able to deal with the oxygen component so easily that the lead becomes poisonous. Do you get me? That's a wild guess on my part, but it makes sense. Why else would lead oxide, the previous favorite, have fallen out of favor? Because lead oxide in paint was really bright, really white. True, titanium isn't lead. I do believe that's the end of the tape. That's the end of the tape. Roll it, Johnny. So here's the end frame. I'm going to control copy that, paste it over to this frame, and then roll it back one. Now I can also, I'll do as I did in the rest here. I'll make these invisible for now. Just H to hide them. And on this group of clips, I'm going to Alt H to make them all visible. So I want to be able to hear the audio from start to finish. So here I have an entire video completed. And that's entirely what I'm doing too. I have to admit, Greg, yes, I am totally guessing as well as to what the deal must be with titanium dioxide. But however, that being said, I'm not entirely sure that I would think titanium would represent one of those metals that. The reason I know this is that you can have a bone, like a replacement bone or a part or a surgical pin made out of titanium. Should be highly resistant to cracking, never need to be removed. Probably doesn't rust in the body. The conditions to oxidize titanium are so very difficult that once it's oxidized, it's not going to deoxidize. So it's dioxide, right? Not regular oxide. Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, similarly a problem for carbon-based life. Oxygen doesn't help either. This is on takeoff. Maybe I identify the equipment in this one. Maybe I got it forgotten. Yeah, this needs to be 27%. I think the rest of them will do. Oh yes. Zinc is used too because zinc happens to be an excellent oxidizer, and therefore would be the very first thing to oxidize if in an environment where it's contacting a bunch of other things. If I have an iron boat, iron hull, and I put zinc on the outside of the iron hull and put it in salt water, the boat won't rust until the sacrificial metal rusts first. Once it rusts away, then the boat will rust in. Like really start rusting. Probably won't do any cutting here either. I think the natural cuts which follow from the fact that I only ever shot for short periods like that takes care of it. So real durable white paint, yes, costs $100 a quart. Truth. Was that or, poison ourselves? Lead very definitely is hazardous to health. Toxic. As I said earlier, I was doing these early clips so I can go over some of this information again, but these are WestJet. These are all WestJet there. Canadian, or Air Canada Star Alliance is in a Boeing aircraft, I think, or an Airbus. It's got those little winglets which are up and down. Maybe that's Airbus. I gotta look that up again to be 100% sure. The one I'm in is Embraer, I think is how it's spelled. I'll look it up. I looked it up actually when I got up there first. Yeah, the E-Jet or something, or it's 190. 190. Yeah, E-Jet. This is an interesting problem, this E-Jet. They compete with Bombardier regional jets, which I've flown in before, Boeing 717 and 737-600, and the Airbus 318. I think Airbus 318 is what the other one was, the Star Alliance one. Airbus has those winglets. They're not visible in any of these pictures. They are in that one. I don't think Boeing has winglets. Oh, it does, sort of like the ones I've got, but it's the NG one. You need a respirator to spray. True, you do. Now there's a question, Greg. Is that because of something which is in the paint itself, which is toxic, or is it merely because the paint, before it dries, is in such a very small, vaporized form that if your lungs were to take it in, it would literally paint your lungs, close up all of the blood vessels and the like, and suffocate you that way? It might not be because of toxicity. It could be because of other related issues, like merely just it's become so airtight. If you follow me, if you get what I'm saying. Once sprayed, you could lick it, couldn't you? And it wouldn't kill you. If it's we call it atomized sometimes when you take a liquid and spray it. It's been atomized when it's vaporized. It's a little bit bigger than an atom. Quite a bit bigger. This is on the ground at YYT, or YYZ. I'm just getting an idea of how long this is going to take. Low volt, can't hear me? I can turn that up. It's in the paint, especially in the hardener or catalyst. Ah, right on. Well, as I say, once hardened, if it was to harden inside your lungs, that wouldn't be good anyway. Is it toxicity or merely you can't breathe? It's airtight. The fact that there's a hardener catalyst doesn't bother me. The winglets help with airflow over the wing, especially like it prevents turbulence forming at the end of the wing, so that you can get more and more planes in the same small spaces like at an airport. There's less destructive airflow coming immediately off the end of the wings in like little, it looks like little horizontal tornadoes when they're tracked in a wind tunnel. At least that's my understanding of it. A layman's understanding nonetheless. But that's the answer. I don't even need to look it up. Look it up. Star Alliance uses different equipment to Air Canada Rouge. First item. This kind of stuff is more interesting to me, really. This, how to handle ground traffic and stuff. That's cool too. Pretty sure I can like cut audio this way if I absolutely had to. I can just cut off this, the desktop if it's too much. Or turn it down this way a little. Hard cut there. Runway 24 and 06. I didn't get any film of the run-ups or stuff, like the engine run-ups to certain, but they generally do that earlier in the day. Do the test once and then let the plane fly the rest of the day. This plane arrived at the gate and turned around again within a half an hour of arriving. And it probably came from St. John's before it turned around and went back to St. John's. I have high reasons, I suspect that might have been the deal. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe it came from British Columbia, arrived there, and then carried on. So this is the result of the, how to put it, this is the result of the coast-wide milk run from BC, like the red eye even, from BC all the way over to Newfoundland. Let me tell you, he hit V1 and rotated really, really quick. Seemed like he got off the ground faster in Toronto than he did in St. John's on the first leg. Rotate. Positive climb rate. I can give you something else to give you a comparison. What I mean when I say it helps with turbulent air that flows at the end of the wingtip. I don't know, Greg, have you ever used a canoe paddle? When you put your canoe paddle in the water and you push against the water, there are ways of interacting with your canoe paddle in the water, which will or won't cause an eddy to form in like a vertical whirlpool fashion, like a tornado form in the water. That's the natural consequence of putting that flat blade with a rounded edge or flattened edge. It's tapered off. It gets thicker generally in the middle than it is on the ends, and it gets wider and longer. When you force that through the water, and then you cut it up one way or the other, the force going back through the water, once introduced, causes eddies off the trailing edge of the blade on either side. and they generally collapse to form a whirlpool in the standard direction for the hemisphere we're in. And that's essentially what happens with the turbulent air at the end of the wing. I had to think about that for a second. When you're in a canoe, one of the first things that you get trained, if you've ever had any kind of instruction in it, is that you shouldn't necessarily use your canoe paddle by applying force to that eddy, because that's where you've derived a lot of your force from. So to try to stop that eddy would be actually to break yourself against your own forward momentum way more than is necessary. So it will slow you down more over. It's like losing more energy. So what they call the C stroke or a J stroke is done in a very specific way. I know them from body memory, so I'm thinking of them that way. They're done very specifically to try to avoid exposure of that trailing and leading edge to the very eddy you've already created, because it's trailing the blade's motion. So when you paddle from front to back, the eddy forms in front of the blade. You have to cut up against it and try to minimize all friction against your blade with it. The trailing winglet, the winglet which curves up, or a winglet which has a blade, like a wing coming out like that from the fuselage of an airplane. How would I show? I'd have to get an image up. Fuselage is like front to back, so the nose of the plane, the tail of the plane. The wings coming off the fuselage, and the winglet is a piece at the top of the wings, trailing and leading edge, that would physically break the airflow. So the turbulent, like eddy, which curves and, as I say, curves very much in the manner of a tornado. Strange, if you get into a wind tunnel with an airplane, the two wings go off either side, and then the eddies which form counter-rotate to one another. That's a natural consequence of the shape of the airplane and the fact that it's been made aerodynamic. The more aerodynamic you make it, the more likely there are going to be these areas of spill where some of the force from the passage or friction, like of the air against the airframe, will form things like eddies. And if you put those winglets, especially the Airbus ones, in the direction or the flow of where those eddies form, it tends to dispel them immediately. So you get a high amount of friction on the winglet, on the very end of the wing. And sometimes those winglets are removable for that reason, so if there's any kind of friction or paint scratching or anything else, if they get damaged, you can remove the winglet and cheaply replace it, as opposed to actually causing damage along the whole length of the wing due to something else. Like air friction. When the eddies spill off the edge of the very smooth wing, I'm not sure if that causes more or less damage to them, but the winglets do certainly help to cut down with eddies which last for a longer period of time on the ground. So you can stack more planes closer together, nose to tail, to take them off, and take them off more frequently if you can get rid of the destructive counter-rotating eddies. That stuff can flip over little small planes. Not just the jet exhaust, but the eddies themselves. Because it's lift. Once it hits a wing, it can flip the wing up or down or whatever. So yeah, very much an episode is going to be talking about fluid dynamics sooner or later. Fluid dynamics was once explained to be like this. This is the end of part A, by the way. Thanks for sticking around there, Hill, Jack, and Greg. I've been enjoying having you around. A friend of mine when I was going to high school, before I got into high school, a friend of mine in the sense that she was older than I was, but we managed to cooperate and communicate with one another effectively. She explained the speed of sound to me like this, by using fluid dynamics as the illustration. She described it as being able to throw a rock into a puddle so fast that the rock hits the bottom of the puddle before the water closes in around it. And that's exactly right. I got older and began to understand what the implication was. Insofar as the speed of sound is concerned, when something travels faster than the speed of sound in the local medium, it gets out ahead of the very consequence of the sound's collapse behind it, in much the same way that a canoe paddle will cause eddies in the direction opposite. Like, they exist in time and space back in time from where the paddle would have been. They're back here in front of the paddle, not behind the paddle where you just pushed, if you get what I mean. So when you pick the paddle out of the water, you're literally lifting it up out of the way of the eddy, because it's trailing the paddle's motion. And it's the same thing with the speed. The speed of sound is very much the same problem. There's a very highly turbulent region in the speed of sound, close to where the speed of the barrier of sound is. Once you pass that turbulent region, it gets quite smooth again. You can go straight on through Mach 2, 3, 4, 6, and not ever find the same kind of turbulence again. But at very high speeds, there are other issues with airframes. We're talking about titanium and high-speed aircraft. Hello, everybody. Last time I checked, too, the regular cruise speed for passenger jetliner is around 0.85 Mach. Or Mach 0.85. 85% of the speed of sound is generally what they travel at. I did notice the speed once or twice during the flight, but I didn't make explicit note of it. And it was expressed in both kilometers an hour and miles per hour. Either way, it was lower than what the speed of sound would have had to have been. And it took about 3 hours to do 2,200 kilometers, 2,200. See, that's why you say 22. 2,200 is much better than saying 2,200, and it sounds like maybe you're prevaricating between the orders of magnitude involved. You get what I mean? 2,200, what's the difference? How about 20,000, 2,200, huh? The conditions in Toronto were broken clouds. Oh, it was easily more than 50%. Probably about it wasn't 7/8, but it was about 5/8 cloud cover, and St. John's had about 7/8. This is at altitude 37,000 feet, and before we started frosting over. That's all I'm going to see for most of the trip, and so I don't bother filming most of it. Oh, that's immediately after climb out, yeah. Totally is. After being at altitude for most of the trip, and this is in the Maritimes now. So I didn't get any film. I couldn't see the United States at all. It would have been immediately below me. It would have been going over northern Maine and then looking north toward Canada. So if you've been watching for this first part, this is episode, 43 of the Banjocast. I am going to be returning in a very short while to continue with this particular project, which I've been working on this afternoon. I'm using Blender to marry together a series of video clips, which I took on an airplane trip in just the last 48 hours. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment below. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm holding on to a lot of the subs too. I guess most people just kind of subscribe and wander away. But the people that stick around, I'm glad to see you. And I will return in the space of an hour.